Competitive Hearthstone is a bit of a different beast than standard play or ranked ladder Hearthstone. While anyone can participate in a competitive Hearthstone arena, to be successful it requires an in-depth understanding of matchups, tech cards, creating well-rounded lineups, as well as the endurance to play multiple games at a time. Join me while I start 2021 with no knowledge of competitive Hearthstone and see how I improve throughout the year. Becoming a Grandmaster is obviously an unrealistic expectation. I will play in both qualifiers and grassroots tournaments to monitor my improvements throughout the year, as well as aim for higher and higher end season ranks on ladder. My name is Sam, and this is Getting Competitive in Hearthstone. What's going on, everybody? We are back with episode number 6 of Getting Competitive in Hearthstone. I've been loving doing this series so far, but I want to let you guys know that this episode is going to encompass the past 2 weeks of qualifiers, those being held on the weekend of the 6th and the weekend of the 13th. And the reason for that is because on the weekend of the 6th, I went 0-1, which doesn't feel very good. But I was talking to my buddy Zaj, who said, hey man, half of the people that do qualifiers go 0-1. And that's true. That's very true. So I want to talk a little bit about that, my mentality, my reflection on that loss, and what I changed the week after to do better. So the first thing I want to get into is the decks that I brought. I brought Aggro Rogue. This is the list that Gabby was playing. I am not sure if Gabby did qualifiers. I'm sorry I didn't look at that beforehand. But I do know they've been playing on ladder quite a bit. Basically, it's your Aggro Rogue deck, except it tops out at Flick, and Flick's really good at taking care of clowns, treants, and glowflies. And it kind of gives the deck survivability against Ramp Paladin, and Token Druid. Aside from that, the only thing I would change about this list, and I'm thinking about changing for the future, is cutting out that Brain Freeze for Nitro Boost Poison, because Nitro Boost Poison is just nuts. So just a really good card. The next list I brought was Control Warlock. This list got second in qualifiers. It's really, really good in a Token Druid. Unfortunately, and you've seen a video on that, it's on my channel. If I'm a good content creator, we'll be doing that little gray spoiler thing to go check that out. If not, I will put it in the description if I forget about that. But basically, it's really good in a Token Druid, and it can survive against control decks. Good in the Priest. Ticketus is so good into those matchups. But the lineup I faced was just a ton of aggro. It was a Zoo, Aggro Rogue, and Token Druid, and while I beat the Token Druid, I just couldn't beat the Zoo Warlock, and this deck kind of crumbled to that, rightfully so. I mean, look at this deck. This is not built to beat Zoo Warlock. And then the last deck I brought was Enrage Warrior, but it ran crabs, and it's a weird list, like Stage Dives, Nitro Boost Poison. I've gone back to the original build of Enrage Warrior. This deck is cool. It's pretty aggressive, especially if crab can stick, but if it can't, then it just kind of gasses out pretty quickly. So the reason I'm showing these decks instead of just glossing over the fact is that weekend I got a little anxious about myself as a player, right? Like, I did really well the first week, top 33. That feels awesome. But I was just like, this is the big leagues, and I want to do well. So I kind of fell into the trap of playing to beat the meta rather than just playing decks I'm comfortable with, which is why I brought that Control Warlock, which is why I brought Crabs and Aggro Rogue, which I'm confident in Aggro Rogue, but not to the same level as like Demon Hunter or Aggro Rogue. It was just weird, and I think that mentality, that overthinking, analyzing, really hurt me. But I do want to show you a resource I've been using a lot. It should be on screen instead of my ugly mug, but it's off curve done by WickedGood, who runs this podcast in the same name. It's a really, really good spreadsheet of all the lists, the tiers of qualifiers and Masters Tours. It shows the winners list, shows the top 8s, and if you click on those lists, you will actually be taken to Donkey's website, who's an awesome data collector also, and it will show you the lists that they played that won it. It also shows you card variety, card frequency, and density. It's a really good resource if you're thinking about doing qualifiers. Highly recommend it. That link will be in the description below, so will the link to his podcast. But yeah, so that's what I changed between those weeks. The idea was, instead of bring decks that are just good, like I know, for example, if you look at WickedGood's spreadsheet, you will know that Silas Control Warrior is good in the current competitive meta. However, I'm not good with that deck. I'm really good with the decks I brought this week, which were Soul Demon Hunter, Aggro Rogue, and Enrage Warrior. I do need to practice a bit more with Enrage Warrior, and that's the goal for this week and next week, because there's no qualifiers going into the weekend, this next coming weekend, which I believe will be the 20th. Yeah, the 20th is the next coming weekend, and there will be no qualifiers that week, so because I'm playing a ton of practice. I am thinking about turning my lineups more mid-range to kind of hopefully target more of the field than just bringing lists that I know I'm good with, but expanding on the role of those decks within that lineup. And we'll talk about my lineup that I brought this past weekend. Speaking of this past weekend, ended up in the top 65, went 2-1, pretty happy with that. It is kind of a bummer to do best of 3, and then if you lose, you're out, but I understand there's not a lot of great ways to do it because there's such a large number of people. So I will take a top 66, top 65, and do better in 2 weeks, and hopefully crush it. That's the goal, right? So guys, as we get into this video, I know it's been a bit of a long intro, I'll wrap it up. Leave a like and subscribe. You will see some highlights after we go over the deck lists of games that I thought were really good as a voiceover. And yeah, take it easy, and I'll see you all in the Klein to go over the decks. See ya. So the first list I want to bring up is the Soul Demon list. This list has been consistently my favorite deck to play for qualifiers and in competitive. This deck got me a legend this month. I was talking to RonMexico, who I talked with a bit before when putting this list together, and he suggested taking out the Ildari studies as well as the Soul Shear. Where's that card? Right here, the Soul Shear, and adding back in the second Bladed Lady and Chaos Nova. Chaos Nova is surprisingly just a really good card into a lot of the decks that this was weak to, like Cheese Paladin and Token Druid, and now we just kind of curve out a little better. And Soul Shear we don't really need because there's not really any single targets we're looking to remove, except for Dark Glare, and if we see a Warlock, we're pretty happy about that, because we're just going to hit them in the face a bunch and end their life. But this deck has not changed much besides that. We have our Spirit Jailers, we have our Lucky Do Hoarders, which is a great 3-drop, Marrow Slicer, which all synergize well with our Soul Shatter Mystic, and our Soul Shard Lapidary, and Sociologist Militia. We run the Broken card and Skull of Gul'dan. Bladed Lady is really easy to get on this list. And in terms of weapons, we have the Eldrachi Warblades, and again, Marrow Slicer. Warblades combos really well with Il'gynoth for endgame finishers against control decks. And we have Relentless Pursuit, and Twin Slice and Chaos Strike to buff up our weapons, to help shade out those Bladed Ladies. And if we run to aggressive matchups like Rogue, or Zoo, or Token Druid, we have Chaos Nova, Shard Shatter Mystic, and 1 Blade Dance to clear up their boards and just keep pressing damage. Aside from that, we also run Mana Feeder for draw. This deck is just so well constructed, it's so fluid, it's honestly one of my favorite decks to play, and I will probably be doing a video on this one soon. The second list I brought was Aggro Rogue. This actually comes in the VS list. I know that Weapon Rogue was kind of big for a while because of the card Steel Dancer, which worked really well with our Nitro Boost Poisons and our Self-Sharpening Sword, but we kind of cut that and brought down the curve, so there's no real... We're not looking to win in the mid-game, we're just looking to push so much damage, because we have cards like Penflinger, who synergizes super well with zero-cost spells like Preparation and Cutting Class, which is very easy to get to zero cost, as well as just these 1-mana spells like Deadly Poison, buffs our weapon, Nitro Boost Poison, buffs our weapon, and any of our stealth minions we run on the deck, like Spy Mistress, Worgen Infiltrator, and Sneaky Delinquent. And Secret Passage is a good way to find lethal outs with cards like Eviscerate in the deck. Our stealth minions synergize well with Greyheart Sage, and because our curve is so low, we run Swindle for even more card draw. In this deck, there's Swindle, Greyheart Sage, Cutting Class, and Secret Passage, all for card draw. It's so easy to draw your whole deck and kill your opponent with no cards in your deck. It's ridiculous how easy that is. And on top of that, the main reason this deck works is because of Self-Sharpening Sword. It's not uncommon to get this to a 9-10 attack weapon and hit them in the face once or twice with that amount of damage. I've been killed from 22 with this deck on ladder. I've killed opponents from ridiculously high amounts. And this Penflinger, we have to weave in correctly and set up turns to create lethal, so it's a little bit less linear than the Weapon Rogue that we saw a few weeks ago. We also have Prize Plunder. We don't need to run a sap. We don't need to run that Plague of Madness, I believe it's called. Right here it is. Plague of Madness, the 1 mana spell. Equip a 2/2 poisonous knife. Because our cards cost no mana half the time, this is really easy to get out and take care of just big taunt minions in the way. So we don't need to run sap. We can run 2 of these. Instead, it's also pressure. This deck, I think if you play this on your climb to Legend 2, you'll have a lot of success with it. I had a lot of success with it in qualifiers this past week. I am thinking of transitioning this deck to more of a mid-range deck like Spell Damage Mage or Combo Rogue in the next few weeks, but we will see. And the last deck I brought was Enrage Warrior. And Enrage Warrior is one of the top tier decks in qualifiers right now, and I didn't bring it because of that reason. I brought it because I do like to play this deck a lot. Let's go through this deck and just see what the goal is of this deck. I think a lot of people have the misconception it's a combo deck where you try and end the game with Grom and Corkcrown Elite by damaging it with Enrage and then copying it with Bloodsworn Mercenary. That is the point. Where's the Bloodsworn Mercenary? That is the point of this list, is to eventually kill the opponent that way. But throughout the whole game, let's put that back in there. Throughout the whole game, we have different ways to deal face damage with cards like Reaper's Scythe, which is a 4-attack weapon, and we can buff it with Nitro Boost Poison. And if you play a spell with the Reaper's Scythe, it also deals damage to adjacent minions, so it's board control also. Warmaul Challenger takes care of early game threats, and then we can buff that with Shield of Honor and copy it also. We also have Sword Eater, which is a phenomenal tempo card, and also procs Cutting Class. We also run Risky Skipper and Armor Smith to gain a bunch of armor, and then Battle Rage to draw a bunch of cards. And if the board is wide with a Risky Skipper, we can discount this Blood Boil Brute pretty easily. We also have Ankar to get to our Risky Skipper and our Sword Eaters pretty easily. The Sky Raider I'm not a huge fan of, but I have seen a lot of lists actually cutting this Nitro Boost Poison for another Raider and another Bomb Wrangler. I can see why it is it's really good early game tempo, which this deck does kind of lack. So maybe over the next 2 weeks we will kind of test that out and see how we do on ladder with it. But the whole goal of the deck is actually to get them down to a killable range, and that depends on what you're trying to combo. Grom and Enrage on 8 is 12 damage, 2 Enrages is 14 damage, which it's pretty easy to get them to about half or just less than half with this list by turn 8. Or we can, on turn 7, Corkcrown, copy Corkcrown, damage Corkcrown, and then copy it with the Bloodsworn Mercenary, which I can never find in this list apparently. That'll be a total of 12 damage. If we have 8 mana, we can do the Enrage Shield of Honor, which was a total of 18 damage. It is good to know that if you are on coin against a slow deck, Grom getting hit with Enrage and then coining out the copy with Bloodsworn Mercenary is a total of 24 damage. And there's just other ways you can deal damage, and you want to spend your time setting up that lethal with this list. It's a fun list. It's hard to learn. It's not very straightforward. There's a lot of different diverging paths that you have to learn, and I'm still learning it. So we're going to take this next week to see if this is something I can learn, and if it's something I can hopefully take to qualifiers and feel a bit more confident with it in 2 weeks. And before we get into it, guys, there will be 3 highlights, but I do want to give a huge shout out to BitbyBit. RonMexico and BitbyBit will be down in the description. You should be seeing some gameplay on the screen right now. BitbyBit helped me practice some Priest this weekend, and kind of made me realize that while Priest is good in this meta, it's not something I'm good with or proficient with enough to want to bring. I couldn't really bridge that gap between the early game control and the late game pressure that the deck needs to do to be successful. So with that, guys, thank you to BitbyBit, and leave a like and subscribe on this video. Go give him a follow on Twitch. I'll see you all in the highlights for some fun games. Take it easy. Alright, so these are 3 highlights I'm going to show you. This first one is obviously Enrage Warrior versus Zoo Warlock. These videos are a little quick. They are 200 times speed, so double speed, just so we don't have a whole lot of dead air, and it speeds up the gameplay a little bit. But they're going to start out with a Flame Imp. I'm really happy we got this risky skipper early on, it's going to be really beneficial. They are playing a bit of a weird list. They run wand makers and pen flingers. They start with a dark glare, which is kind of scary. So we're going to coin out the Ankar and then kill it with the Enrage. I don't know if that was an ideal play, but it was a play that definitely stopped them from comboing off, which is good. We don't want them to really be comboing off too much, but they will go wider here with the Spirit Jailer and Wand Maker. And I'm thinking we can kind of start to combo off a little bit with this risky skipper. We're not going to, but we are going to buff the Ankar to draw 2, and then we'll take out their Flame Imp. We've already been dealt 11 damage. It's kind of nuts how much damage Zoo can deal pretty quickly, and not even to themselves. He's only taken 3 damage. So these Wand Makers in here, honestly, to buff up the Pen Flinger. We're going to Sinister Steel and get a Lackey off of that, and the Lackey they discover makes this game kind of wonky. It's really cool what happens, but we're going to take the skipper we drew off the Ankar, not the one we kept in the mulligan, and then just develop a little bit. A 2-1 and a 1-2 don't scare me too much. And just based on their last turn, they didn't have a whole lot to do. And we're also ahead on board now. And if they don't kill the skipper, they will make more bombs. That's something they should be aware of. They will kill the skipper, but not before making more bombs. And there's a Brightwing also. Oh, that was the one they discovered off of the Lackey. The one they get off of the Brightwing is kind of nuts, to be honest. We're going to go in with a Blood Boil Brute for 5. Go face first, obviously, and clear off their board. And that's going to be really hard for them to deal with a 5-7. And right now I don't know what the legendary minion is in their hand, but once we see it, it makes the game go a little longer than it should. It's a Nazari. It's a Nazari. He can heal to full, and I'm like, well, that's just not very good. But so that was order 2. I should have traded into the Expired Merchant. But we'll clear their board and be left with a 7-7 to set up lethal, which is awesome. But there's a Matron into a Mosher, which will clear off and heal him to 21. And now we're in a bit of a weird spot. We can set up a skipper, which is kind of what I'm thinking of doing right now, to set up for copying Grom next turn. And I can do that and leave my field alive, because I can go with the Armor Smith to get some armor, and then the South Sea Deckhand, and then we can take off the Mosher. And if this survives, we're just setting up to deal 20 plus damage next turn with the Grom, which is great. It's not going to stay that way. He's going to clear off this board, but it's setting up for possible lethal. He will Soulfire the South Sea Deckhand, and then Wicked Whispers and draw more cards, as well as buff his Tour Guide and draw for 1 by dealing 2. And there's a Pen Flinger to clear off my risky skipper, unfortunately. And so that lethal setup is no longer there. We also don't have armor gain anymore with our skipper Armor Smith. But I am going to set up a Grom here regardless. It's still damage he has to deal with, and he's at 14. And there's another Soulfire. He's gotten so many Soulfires, and then Nazari has dodged so much damage. We're going to keep the pressure on, though, and set up a Korkron. Hopefully next turn we can make something happen with it. But it looks like he's going to heal to full now with the Nazari. The good... Oh, that's such a sad top deck to get to. The good thing is, it does look like he is running out of resources. He has drawn a lot, and we've just hit him for 12. I don't think playing the Barov here is a good idea. Good job, Past Sam, for not playing the Barov. He will tap again to get down to 16. There's a Pen Flinger, another Pen Flinger, and there's the trade with a Nazari, as well as a Flesh Giant and a Wriggling Horror. This is a scary board. I'm not dead to this board, but it is a scary board. We will play the Barov to to free this board up a little bit, and trade the Bloodweaver, not the Bloodweaver, the Bloodsail into the Nazari and take off the board. I'm a little delayed on that, sorry. I couldn't remember card names. He's going to keep tapping. He's at 13 after healing, and he will start going face to these Pen Flingers. He does have to start putting on this pressure, though, because he is at 10 and I'm still at full health, and he is limited on the cards left in his deck. But, I mean, it's not going to stop him. But there's a Swordier. We get to draw with the cutting class. That is not going to be lethal yet, though. But we can keep pushing the damage and set up an Armor Smith just to gain more armor. He's at 5. We have set up quite a bit of pretty good defenses for ourselves. I'd be surprised if we can get through this. He's going to attack. That will add a second... It'll add 2 Nightshade Matrons to his hand. And then he's going to keep flicking the pens at me. So many pens. But there's the second Matron gone. And actually not clearing out the War Maul Challenger got us lethal. That was a fun one. That Nazari was wild. And this is why we brought Demon Hunter. Guys, this is a really quick match. This is so quick. Like, I almost thought about not putting it 2x speed just because it's so quick, but I want to be a little consistent. So in this matchup, we're looking for soul cards. We did not get any of the soul cards. Like Spirit Jailer to set up for a Shatter Shard Mystic. He will set up with a Nature Studies, which can go into his next turn. So there's part of our soul setup. We can Marrow Slicer into the Mystic we just drew. So we are feeling good. We also have Blade Dance to clear off minions as well. He drew 3 cards and discarded Gibberling, which feels pretty good. And there's a Chaos Nova. Chaos Nova is so good in this matchup. We're going to just poke one of those to take a little bit of the pressure off the board. And then there's a Gibberling, plus a Bloom, plus an Innervate, plus a coin. He's going wide. And there's the Solar Eclipse into the Arbor Up, which is going to make his board pretty big. But Chaos Nova will clear this board, and would have, unless he buffed stats another way. But we will leave the weapon up for a Blade Dance, which we will play next turn pretty handedly. We'll draw first. Chaos Strike is good, and we will just clear their board off and go face for 5. This is the plan with Token Druid, is just take their stuff off the board as quickly and as best as you can. We can even set up a Militia next turn, which should probably close this game out. As much as I want to get the Skull over, the Skull isn't what's going to win us the game at this point. It's going to be clearing his board and just creating counter pressure. And there's... the Forest Aid is kind of hard to deal with, because we do need to follow up with our board clears. We can't just clear it once. They will create a second one. And instead of... I did send the 5 damage face. I was going to say it might have been okay to trade there, but again, okay, and he goes wide, a little wider again. Doesn't play the second Forest Aid. We will draw with our Skull now and just clear their stuff off. I don't know if there was a lethal there. I didn't count. I think I was more in the moment of clearing things from board. He has a second Forest Aid, which he's not going to play here. He's going to play the Fungal Fortunes to draw into something. But by this point, the game is closed out pretty well. We're just... yeah, even with that trade, we still have 8, 9, plus a whole bunch of weapon buffs in our hand. This game is done. It's just waiting to go phase at this point. Yeah, there's 14. It's done. Like I said, quick. Oh, I'm sorry. I am waiting here just to send the screenshot in. But this last one is Aggro versus Token Druid. And so the game plan is a little different here. We're both very aggressive decks. But Token... we really want to keep Token Druid off the board while creating some kind of counter pressure. And that Prize Plunger helps us do that. And with the coin, it's okay to keep the Greyheart Sage. This is kind of scary. A Dribbling on turn 1 is hard to deal with, especially because 2 of them will be buffed. But this Penflinger is going to help us clear this out just enough so it's easier for us to deal with. The balancing act here is making sure we don't run out of resources before that is over with. Luckily, it looks like we did that pretty well. He only has a Adorable Infestation token on board now, That preparation off the top was awesome. The Eagle, though, is kind of hard to deal with. And instead of drawing 2 cards off Sage, we will continue to develop the board and take his things off the board. He can get rid of this Penflinger, and I think getting rid of this Penflinger right now is probably a pretty good play, but he decides not to. And we can Sage here to draw 2. Unfortunately, the 2 cards we drew were not that good, so we will go face with Penflinger, develop another Stealth Minion, and pass. He will take the Penflinger off board. That's actually not that great for us. And the Solar Eclipse into a Rising Wind to draw 2, not develop, actually feels pretty good. So it's kind of weird here. I do decide to just develop the board a bit, and I will take both his minions off board so they can't buff. Another play there was using the Eviscerate to trade and dagger up. I don't think that was a bad play either, but drawing cards seemed a little better, especially the Nitro Boost Poison that we can equip to a weapon to make that cutting class cost less. He's going to keep drawing cards that he got off Nature Slays and Fungal Fortunes. Luckily for him taking a turn off is pretty good, so we can Secret Passage. And there's that Self-Sharpening Sword that we can set up now and draw 2 off of the cutting class with. And there's some extra lethal damage, extra reach for lethal with the Sinister Strike, the boost, and the Eviscerate. We don't attack with the Stealth Minion just so we have something stealth if he does something like Bees or trades with his face. It's not something we necessarily can deal with relatively well, but it looks like the amount of damage in my hand plus that Sinister Strike is going to end up being a pretty good lethal here. Just draw the good cards, the game is easy. But yeah, good game.